democracy goes to big risks and will not be as resilient as it needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a very nice conclusion already. Yeah, and I think our next speaker will have something to say also about strong political follow-up to citizen councils. So our second speaker is Thorsten Sterk, who is a campaigner at Mehr Demokratie in Germany, and who has worked on organizing a first civil society-led citizens assembly in Germany last year, and is now preparing an official citizens assembly on the role of Germany in the world. This citizens assembly is supported by the German government and the parliament. Of course, in this role, Thorsten is also closely following citizens assemblies around the world. Thorsten, please go ahead.
Hello, thank you for your introduction, Caroline. Hello to all who are interested in this hot evening in Europe and around the world. I will tell a little about Citizens Assembly. As Caroline told, I'm following around the world, monitoring the media every day, searching for Citizens Assemblies, citizens juries, and will first explain a little about how they work and where they take place and which effect Corona does actually have on these assemblies. So I hope everyone can see this. So first, Mr. Lambertz told a little about the Citizens Dialogue, Citizens Assembly in East Belgium. How does it work? The Citizens Assemblies, the participants are drawn by lot from the whole population. They are a random stratified sample, means that people are taken with criteria as education, age, gender, migration background, and the region they are living, the size of the population of their city, so that you have a mini public of the whole population in this assembly. They gather together to deliberate together on several days about a topic, maybe, for example, climate, traffic, gender in Ireland, actually. Doing this, they are informed by experts on the special topics who tell them about the pros and cons of a topic. And finally, they formulate recommendations which go to the politicians, to the parliaments, which should take them serious. What effect did Corona, COVID-19 have on citizens' assemblies? Citizens' assemblies were postponed as they were running in France, in the UK, in Ireland, in Scotland, and in local communities. Mr. Lambertz told also in East Belgium, in the German community, the process was stopped, and I heard it should start again in September. What happened then? Some of these citizens' assembly tried to went online by video conferences, as we are doing now on Zoom. That was taking place in France and UK, where the climate assemblies in both countries put recommendations on COVID-19 recovery on the agenda and formulated recommendations and gave them to the politics to change the way the economy is running in regard to climate. Other citizens' assemblies in Ireland, in Scotland, and in East Belgium were waiting, were not going online, and waiting for better, healthier times to start again. There were also local citizens' assemblies, not only nationals, which went online. There's one actually running in Kendal in UK. One is announced in Brighton and Hove, also in UK, one in Bristol, and one took place in spring in Turku in Finland. Interesting survey on the Climate Assembly UK, which effects it had on the participants. They were asked if they liked doing citizens assembly better all in person or all online, or in a kind of mixture of in person and online. And 46% said that they prefer to have it all in person. 51% said they prefer a mixture of in-person and online, and 3% said that they prefer citizens' assembly all be done online. Interestingly, there are some assemblies also on the topic COVID-19 and the recovery themselves. There will be an assembly, for example, in Oregon in the USA, which is running since July. One just was announced in Bristol. There was a citizens panel, not an assembly, in the West Midlands in the UK, which just put its recommendations to the politics, and all took also part only online. If you want to have information, there's much information, some also in English on our website Bürgerdialog, and you can send me an email to info@bürgerdialog. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thorsten. I suspect there will be a lot of questions for you later. Yeah, and then finally, our last speaker for today is Helen Shurek, who is the regional lead for Europe at the Open Government Partnership. They work together with governments at all levels to support them in the development and implementation of open government reforms and to improve mechanisms of citizen participation. Helen, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Thank you for inviting me to participate at this event to speak a little bit about the work OGP is doing and what we've been seeing in terms of participation. And I have a few interesting examples. One is actually the UK Climate Assembly of how governments took things online, or organizations took participation mechanisms online. And I have a few tips and ideas to talk about as well. So just to talk a little bit about OGP at first, we're basically an organization, a partnership of reformers working inside and outside of government to transform how government serves its citizens, to change the way that government does business. And really at the heart of this lies the principles of participation and co-creation, whereby governments and civil society, private sector, academia, everyday citizens are coming together to jointly discuss big societal challenges. The partnership was founded in 2011. We're now 78 countries. We have a growing cohort of local governments participating, and we're working with countless civil society organizations around the world, as well as regional and international institutions. We focus on a number of things. So when a country joins OGP, they commit to establishing a multi-stakeholder dialogue with all these different stakeholders I've just mentioned, whereby everybody has an equal seat at the table. So civil society is working directly with government. And through this dialogue, stakeholders jointly identify the big issues in society which they feel can be resolved through open government solutions. So working on more transparency, more accountability, more participation. And through that dialogue, what is developed is an action plan. And an action plan contains a set of concrete solutions to address those challenges surfaced through the dialogue. And those are what we call commitments. And those commitments can focus on a broad range of issues. It might be working on climate, anti-corruption, public service delivery, opening up the judicial systems in a country. And those action plans last for 2 years. So it's a relatively short policy cycle. And the third component of the process is the monitoring side of things. So in each country or local jurisdiction, we have an independent researcher who comes in to check both the quality of that dialogue. So was it a rich, meaningful dialogue amongst all these different stakeholders? Looks at the quality of the commitments in the action plan. So do these commitments, these solutions, are they going to really change the way and transform governments? Or is it just a sort of a small tweak? And then there's a monitoring, and then it also looks at how well these commitments are implemented. So whether the government actually does what it says it's going to do on paper in that action plan. So this topic of participation is really lying at the heart of what we do, and it's really the core philosophy. And we've seen how our members have dealt with lockdown and the pandemic to overcome the challenges, to continue this dialogue process, to continue developing these action plans. And it has been really challenging. I think coronavirus, it's come at a time when democracies around the world were already under stress. And I think everybody is aware of this, and we have to find digital solutions to our democratic activities to push back against the trend during the pandemic, rather than rolling back civic participation and suspending processes. I do believe this moment has also presented a massive opportunity for citizen engagement. And in our recent conversations at OGP, I really believe some of the best solutions to the pandemic have been these kind of co-created, co-designed things. So whether it's citizens monitoring emergency contracts, or whether governments working with civil society experts, digital rights activists to actually design contact tracing apps with privacy in mind. So these more successful solutions have really involved citizens and civil society organizations. And I think moving participation online is an opportunity for the long term. If we can figure this out well, we can be inclusive in the future, thinking about populations outside of capitals, people with disabilities, childcare needs, time restrictions, and so on. And I think in some cases, people less inclined to show up at a town hall or a council meeting may have found a new sense of civic activism through the convenience of just being able to log on online and do participation online. And I think we realize also it's much cheaper, less damaging for the environment. But this came up last week in the session. The digital divide is a real problem, and not everybody has fast, reliable internet connections or access to like a computer. And we've heard stories about school children just not being able to deliver their homework on time and do things properly. So this is really important when we're designing online participation activities. We have to make accommodations through the tools we choose and through the design of the online activities. And also obviously balancing security and privacy risks with our use of technology. So I'm going to talk about a couple of case studies. One is the UK Climate Assembly, as I mentioned, basically describing really the practical way that they took an offline activity online, and then a couple of other ways that governments have been consulting citizens and working with citizens on through the pandemic and how to address the coronavirus. So the UK Climate Assembly, which Thorsten was speaking about, some of these figures were very interesting. The fact that only 3% would want to do it only online, I think is quite telling. Yeah, what I thought was interesting was some of the ways that they went about it and the considerations that they had. Firstly, ensuring that everybody could always join. So it was not always a given that people had internet. I think there was 1 or 2 people who had to dial in. So it was important to ensure that there were dial-in options, materials were circulated beforehand with numbering, that any kind of interactivity could be done over the phone. It was crucial to test the tech. I think we've all had a few awkward moments the last few months on Zoom, but just really testing the technology is really important for these things, just to set things up smoothly, to set a good mood. It was really important for them to break up the sessions into small digestible chunks rather than doing one big weekend, which would have been the original plan, and spread this out over the course of several weekends. Also, they had to simplify some of the design. There were obviously tech options that are available for things like voting, Q&A, breakouts, but some things that they might have wanted to have done, like virtual whiteboards, for example, weren't an option because of the people calling in by phone. And it was really important for them to consider safety and security, considering that they wanted to keep people anonymous, making sure that nobody's names were traceable and people's phone numbers were not visible. And they had minors also participating in the group. So it was important to consider the number of people in breakout groups and the composition of those breakout groups. So there's just like quite a lot of considerations when taking a very offline activity online. Another cool example I have is from Finland. So in Finland, the Ministry of Finance is actually coordinating OGP, and they're leading on open government of work, despite being the Ministry of Finance and the Money Ministry. But what they did was they led a series of lockdown dialogues with a couple of local foundations. And they had a couple of aims, and it was to give citizens from a cross-section of society time for a constructive dialogue about how they were feeling in the pandemic, how their people were experiencing and what the issues that they were facing. And this information was used to inform the work of the government and inform the services and they were delivering to their citizens. So the dialogues were organized in 30 to 40 small groups with about 6 to 10 people per group. And that included teachers, parents, sex workers, immigrants, entrepreneurs, managers, and civil servants, and more types of people. And the feedback showed that people really appreciated the opportunity to speak with government, to tell them about their issues. And this also led to a better understanding where there were issues or there were problems or frustrations amongst people in society. Another really good example, I think, that just shows the willingness and the fact that this is a really ripe time to capitalize on people's interest to participate is a German hackathon. Perhaps some of you have heard of it. It's called Wir versus Virus. This was a huge hackathon, ended up having 28,000 people participating to find digital solutions to the pandemic. I just think this just demonstrates how ready and willing people are to participate and to try to contribute to solving this issue. Yeah, so there's just a few interesting examples from, these are all OGP countries as well. What have we been doing to support our members? I mean, we've always said that quality participation requires online and offline channels, but to help move our members online and to support this meaningful quality participation, we've developed an online catalogue of online tools which you can use at different parts of a consultation process. It's like divided up into different sections, focusing on things such as whether you want to do voting, you want to do deliberation, you want to do consultation or co-creation. So it is aimed for the OGP process, but it can be used for any kind of participation. So that's lots of tools and resources. And yeah, finally, I would just encourage those of you living and working in OGP members to find more about the OGP process. A number of our members are developing action plans at the moment, focusing on solving and developing solutions to the pandemic and how to use an open government approach in response to the pandemic. So there are opportunities. I'd be happy to talk about specific countries. And I'm also going to drop in some links into the chat box so you have some of these resources. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, Helen. And just so everyone knows, also Thorsten shared some links. We will also make sure that those links are then available on our website afterwards. I think we've had a lot of different things coming together in these first input, and a lot of interesting inputs. And now I would like to open the floor to questions and comments from you. There are a couple of different options to do that. You can either write your question in the chat, but it's always nicer if you ask it live. So for that, there's this little option in the participants window. So you should have a participants window somewhere on your screen where you can raise your hand digitally. I might not see you if you just raise your hand physically. That's why I'm asking you to use that one. And if you raise your hand, then I will give you the opportunity to ask your question live. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, it's also possible to post your questions in the chat there, and then I will make sure that we ask it here to our panelists as well. And I see we have a first question already. Daniela, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, thanks everyone for your presentations. I have maybe not so much a direct question, but more to get your suggestions of, not really directed to any one person. But yeah, if you're familiar, there was announced that there would be a conference on the future of Europe, which would also use the tool of citizens' assemblies from all across Europe to gather people together and to speak about the topics that will be affecting the future of Europe. The details are still not there because it's not really sure how this will play out yet, but we assume, it will be using also sortition, so classic citizens' assembly. This has been postponed, not really due to Corona, more due to the EU, the institutions not being able to come together with a plan, but Corona has been a good alibi for that. And now that soon in the next month, or hopefully as soon as possible, it'll be safe again to meet. How do you envision that this tool, citizen assemblies, could work transnationally? Are there any tips that are learned maybe from the local level or national level that we should really take transnationally? Because if this is going to happen, it will be the first of its kind anywhere in the world, that a transnational, such an international citizens assembly would take place. And what are your tips to do that also in the post-Corona world? How to best do that, mixing the online, offline, different mechanisms, also keeping in mind how multilingual, multicultural the EU is. Thank you.
Great. Would anybody like to start this question? I know that Mr. Lambertz had briefly mentioned the conference on the future of Europe. Yep. Oh, you are on mute. I'm sorry. Let me unmute you. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Now
we hear you.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, thank you very much. the Conference of Europe is a very complicated issue, even without Corona. And with Corona, it will be even more complicated if you think about concrete aspects of this organization. But the main problem of the Conference of Europe is, the future of Europe, is to find a real agreement between the decision makers, the Bermuda Triangle, Parliament, Council, and Commission, because it is very important that these three decision makers give the guarantee that the conclusion of this conference will be really taken into consideration. Otherwise, this process will be the worst thing what was done in the last years about Europe. It is a great opportunity, but it must really be taken into consideration, and it must also be taken into consideration on an open way. If you discuss only specialized technocratical issues, the designation of the Spitzenkandidat or other technical aspects, then you will not mobilize European citizens for a stronger and more efficient European Union. And the other great challenge is to make a link between all these institutional participants on European level, on the level of the national and regional parliaments and other institutions, like, for example, the European Committee of the Regions, and a real efficient citizen dialogue. And this dialogue must be, on my opinion, also on the regional and national level, and also on the European level. And you must find a methodology that can bring the discussion on the ground really on the European level. But it must be a discussion about European issues. These issues are always linked to the complicated institutional framework European Union is living now. And so it is not so easy, but it must be really strong to the people on the ground, because the only one who can bring Europe in the future is the European citizen, and especially also the European citizen in his local and regional authorities. We have 1 million elected people in the cities, in the regions, and if every one of this is together with his citizens, to whom he is really close, will be also advocate for European issues, then we can have success. And we must now start, and it is a little bit difficult to see concretely if coronavirus will be a big methodological challenge. It must be certainly done on a virtual way, partly, but it is very important that we will also have direct contacts between European citizens and also between citizens on the local and regional level, if we will have a real strong message. It cannot happen only on an online way, but we must perhaps start with only online elements and then find other opportunities to discuss. But we have a strong timing. We must find solutions in the next 2 years. Otherwise, we will be too late for the next European elections. And so it is a very tricky issue.
Great, thank you very much. Thorsten, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, maybe we should learn that we should really have a transparent process and a process in which all inhabitants of Europe have the possibility to engage in a citizens' assembly, even if they are not drawn by law to take part in it. But they have the possibility to say their opinion online, as it was made in France at the Climate Assembly, and that maybe the EU starts surveys asking the Europeans which topics should be discussed on the conference on the future of Europe. That I think should be two important points.
Great, thank you. Yes, please, Helen.
Yeah, just to pick up on the point that Karl-Heinz made about this has to be a meaningful dialogue and the inputs have to be used properly. I think we all know that any kind of participation mechanism or activity where this is not meaningful, it's just a box ticking exercise, this can really backfire and cause disengagement and disappointment with the institution or the organization running the process. So this is absolutely key. And I just worry a little bit if the plans are not firm and people don't really know what's happening, who eventually is going to participate, and is it just going to be the sort of the European policy participation nerds like us around the table, or will they really go deeper into society?
Great, thank you very much. There's another question on the conference on the future of Europe in the chat. I don't know if the person, Wolfgang, who wrote this wants to ask that live. I don't know if maybe it's been answered in the meantime, or if you'd like to elaborate a little bit on this. You can just unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it has been answered indeed. I think, and I confirm that it will be quite tricky, as Karl-Heinz Lambertz and Thorsten Sterk have said. There must be maybe a bottom-up process where existing citizens' assemblies at local and regional level can contribute to the conference. That will be time-wise a tricky issue. But on the other side, as Thorsten said, I think there must also be an open space where people can contribute at any time without being a member of such an assembly. I find it quite interesting to see whether or not the existing local examples in East Belgium or Detmold or Baden-Württemberg or elsewhere, or the national assemblies are ready to start the conference on the future of Europe. And I think that's a big challenge for all the institutions to make them aware at local, national, regional level that they have to or can, that there's the opportunity to contribute. So it's really tricky and challenging. Thank you.
Thank you. So there's another question in here, Enno. If you would like to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask it, you can go ahead. Otherwise, I will read it.
Yeah, hi everyone. I hope you can hear me. So my question is, how important is it to explain the complex procedures of the Citizens' Assembly to the general public in comparison to convincing the political decision makers in charge? Because me and some of my friends are also working to achieve a national Citizens' Assembly on climate change issues and finding a social solution, let's call it like that. And I was wondering, what do you think, what's more important, to work with the general public, like for social media and stuff, or to go in towards political decision makers?
Would any of our speakers like to kick off? Yeah, Thorsten, please go ahead.
I think that both is important. You need to convince and inform the public because they have to be interested in the process and the results and should be interested in following it. And if they don't know what's going on there, they won't understand what's going on and won't be interested in the process and the results. And additionally, you should talk with each politician you can reach to convince them about the pros of this process, and that it's not endangering politicians, parties, and parliaments, but enriching them.
All right.
Helen or Mr. Lambertz, would you like to add anything to that? No. Okay, are there any other questions? I don't see anything in the chat. I'm just checking all of the different feeds.
I have a question if there's no.
Sure, please go ahead.
Well, I was interested to ask Thorsten the numbers behind the UK Citizens Assembly, the people who wanted online, offline, only offline. Do you know some of the reasons behind this? Was there any kind of testimonies or anecdotes about how people felt about the online effort? And it wasn't
yeah. There was a survey which was done by Involve UK, which is an organization dealing with sortition and experts, which are experts on sortition. Yeah, and they also asked for reasons why they prefer face-to-face assemblies or a mix of online and face-to-face. Yeah, and some said that it's useful to see the people, meet the people, especially in the beginning, to get to know them. So each assembly should start face-to-face and not online, but then you can go online in the process when you discuss about topics after you have had the possibility to get to know the people. So you don't always need to travel for several weekends and to spend so much time, and you can put the program on smaller issues for some hours and not for whole weekends, for example. And some who prefer face-to-face assemblies said that with instruments like Zoom, some nuances of citizens' assemblies are lost. So it's not good to have only online assemblies. Now in Corona times, some are trying because they have no other solution, no other way. They can't call the people together in one room and take the people in one room. But the solution seems to be for the most to mix these instruments.
Great, thank you. Yeah, just a small reminder, anybody who has questions, please feel free to ask them or to write them in the chat. I know that a recurring question that we've had during these discussions in the past week is the campaigning aspect. How do these tools come into existence? So I was wondering if, I know at least for the Bürgerdialog and for the Bürgerrat, that this has been a long process in developing these tools and bringing them into existence. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit how that has happened, where the idea came from, and what advice would be to people who want to start something similar in their own countries. Who would like to? Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, it is indeed perhaps the most tricky aspect, because if you don't care, you will have always the same people who will participate. The random system is very, very important, but it is not easy to realize if you want to do it really on a professional and a scientific way. But even if you are correct on the selection methodology, you must find people who agree to work with you. And even there, the big problem is to convince people to make this adventure, this experience, because the added value of this citizen dialogue is exactly on the level of the participation of people who normally don't participate on the political life. And if we can convince these people to participate and to come in experience, then it is very fantastic aspect. But it's not easy to do, and it takes time, and you must convince people, and you must also organize the discussion system, the information system on a way that everyone feels good in this context. And that is also the reason why it is really important to have face-to-face meetings. But it is also exact, as Thorsten said, if you have a certain climate between the people, then you can make some work also online, but you must also have the guarantee that the online system will really work, what is not always so easy. The most important aspect for the start is to have a correct representative selection of people from the region you are working. And then the other aspect is really the guarantee for the people that they are doing work that has sense. And they must have the conviction that their results will be taken into consideration. And that is also the fundamental aspect in our experience here in the German-speaking community. There's also the aspect where I am personally the most involved, because I am not participating on the discussions. But I said to everyone, I can guarantee you as President of the Parliament that we will take into consideration your conclusion on a very serious way. We will not say yes to all things, but we will discuss really seriously and on a controversial way, and we will really try to bring your proposals to a result, because that is also very interesting to see that in a public who is not specialized, after a certain time you have convergence. You see that people come to some ideas who are very good and important, and they have also some disputes and points where they cannot agree, but the possibility to have a concrete conclusion is very bigger than I personally thought in the past if I discussed only on a theoretical way about citizens' dialogues.
Thorsten, would you like to share a little bit on the campaigning towards the Bürgerrat and how it came into existence?
Yeah, it was like many citizens' assemblies, inspired by the Irish citizens' assemblies, which had a lot of impact around the world, especially in Europe, with all these citizens' assemblies now coming up. And so we had a visit there. Daniela Vancic was also there. Maybe she can tell what she learned there. We learned from this process there and started our own assembly, chose the topic on democracy, starting with regional conferences where everybody could talk about the agenda this citizens' assembly should have. And so people decided that they wanted to talk about direct democracy, lobbyism, and citizens' participation offline and online. So this was put on the agenda. We invited 160 people from all over Germany to take part in it. Coming out of more than 4,000 invitations we sent to people who could be interested, randomly selected addresses. And yeah, this whole process, we also invited each time politicians to have a view on this, to see how this works, if this may be good for the democracy in Germany at all. So they became familiar to the process. There were politicians from all parties sitting in the German parliament, the Greens, the Conservatives, Social Democrats, the Liberals, and also the AfD. That led to the decision to have now a citizens' assembly on the role of Germany in the world, because they all were more or less convinced, and who was very important was the president of the German parliament, Wolfgang Schäuble, who was somehow the chairperson of the Citizens' Assembly on democracy, and got the results and said that these results should be taken serious, and we should talk about it in our parliament. and he called together important politicians from all parties to find a way to implement the citizens' assembly that is now planned and coming. So it's important to talk to politicians and to involve them in the process.
Yeah, thanks. Helen, I know also that the OGP is very active in at least tracking how these tools are implemented. I was wondering if you have anything to share on how do governments come to this decision to have citizen participation tools, not necessarily citizen councils, but you mentioned, for example, the Finnish example where they had these juries. Is that something that comes from bottom up, or is it a decision of the government themselves? How do these tools come into being?
Yeah, I don't think there's one answer for this. I think in many cases it can be bottom up and it's civil society driven and it's a push, and that can result in a long-term culture change. And I think maybe Thorsten has a different experience, but starting to work with the German government on open government partnership, we've seen, I think, very slowly starting to see more opening up of the government, more consultation processes being established. And it's just a long-term cultural change. And I think the push has come from civil society and the side of citizens. But then I think in some countries where you have the political will from the top, you have a leader who comes in, who is orientated this way, and they want to do these things, and it can come from that and distill downwards. So, I mean, there's no one answer, but yeah, obviously it's much easier to work when it comes from the top and then it just trickles down straight away, but it's kind of more fun to work bottom up as well. But yeah, combination would be the ideal situation, I think.
Okay, thank you. Lars has written a question in the chat. Would you like to go ahead and just ask it, please?
Yeah, I can. The digital form that was discussed for possibilities to give more persons access to the citizens' assemblies might have a risk in that social media tends to show more polarized, harsher statements. Some say that it's because of the increased anonymity and reduced accountability through the digital channels. Have you seen that also in the digital citizens' assembly, and would that be a risk moving to a more online mode?
Yes, Thorsten, please go ahead.
As far as I know and I learned from the Citizens' Assembly, which took place online until now, I haven't heard anything about such effects as assemblies face-to-face, or also these online assemblies are moderated. So you can't be harsh and hard to other people and behave like you are on Facebook or Twitter. I think that the process is the same as in the face-to-face meetings.
Thanks.
Helen or Karl-Heinz?
I really share this point of view explained by Thorsten. It is a question of moderation, and it is also a question of selection of participants. We have an evolution on the social media world where the algorithm are going to bring you only people who have the same opinion as yourselves, and you have also very populist discussions on social medias. But I'm not sure that this kind of reflex will be found on a discussion like a citizen dialogue made online, even because people are not anonymous. They must come with their name, and so I think it is a little bit different.
Helen, is there anything you'd like to add to that? Okay. So I don't see any more questions in the chat. Is there anybody else who would like to ask something or to make a comment? It must be the hot weather. Yeah, please, Lars, go ahead. Yes.
I would have another one, because this idea of the citizens' assembly is something relatively recent, I think, or I perceive it as recent, whereas parties or democracies influenced by parties or by labor organizations have been more traditional. But these organizations tend, I think, to reduce in importance. And so do you think the citizens' assembly or this more bottom-up approach will compensate for this and change our democracies into that more open bottom-up approach?
Who would like to start?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
There is a very interesting aspect after this question, because we have even difficulties to convince under certain circumstances the organizations from the civil society to accept citizen dialogues in the random system, because they are often convinced that as organizations, they are the voice of the citizens. And even if you can convince people that the best way to hear to people is to give them the floor directly, it changed a little bit the political and the societal discussion. Citizen dialogue, if it is really organized in a correct way, paradigm change, because all the decision-making systems on political way, on the level of the civil society, are confronted directly with the citizens as not only a citizen, but a participant of political decisions. And this process is something that can really renew our democracy. And I'm deeply convinced that we need this renewal.
Yeah, I think what is important and new with citizens' assemblies in comparison to parties or NGOs is that they are so-called mini publics. Means that also people with low education, women have a fair share of 50%. There are more young people as are in parliaments or NGOs, trade unions, so that the population and the people can identify more with this democracy instrument as they do now with parties, parliaments, trade unions, where they maybe don't find themselves. So many citizens' assemblies are now popping up, and I often hear that people are very, begeistert, convinced about this new democracy instrument and want to try it. And that there's a great future, and some wish that we won't elect anymore, but only draw people by lot and have them make the decisions as there was in antique Athens.
Yeah, please, Helen.
Yeah, I think one of the really amazing things to come out of these citizens' assemblies, the fact that they build common understanding and trust across people with very, very different viewpoints. And I think this can really help to address the issues of polarization that we see in our societies, and just this tribalism, and the fact that you can really sit people around a table and have a discussion and to build and come to a common understanding of these different viewpoints. I think this is a really impressive outcome of citizens' assemblies.
Thank you. There's an invitation to an event in the chat. There's another question. Please, Andreas, go ahead.
Yes, hello. I mean, I just want to ask you, because we have this series now for a while, and we always speaking about the challenges on democracy, which came up during the Corona crisis. But from my perspective, there are also a lot of chances. And I would really like to know if not only on citizen participation, but in general, what do you see? Is there a positive outcome? How we develop our democracies further during and but also, of course, after the crisis? And then a more specific question for Mr. Lambertz. Do you see already doing you said you had some citizen dialogues also on Corona and COVID-19 measurements. Do you see a higher acceptance in compared to other countries? I mean, we have in Germany now this really confusing and strange demonstrations in Berlin, for example, from people who are really conspiracists and asking for getting rid of these measurements. And my feeling or my idea is a little bit that maybe citizen participation brings more acceptance for these political decisions.
Yes, Mr. Lambertz, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yes. First, a word about our dialogue here, who will be concrete during the month of September. The choice of the issue, of the topic, care systems for elderly persons, was done before Corona, and it was also chosen by a random system and a very great dialogue with the population. The Citizen Council decided to ask the inhabitants, what are the issues you want that we have to discuss? And the conclusion was, let's discuss about care and elderly people. But this issue becomes now get now a very, very new importance, because it is a fundamental issue on all the Corona discussion on the health side. I am sure that Corona will also have other influence on future citizen dialogues, because Corona is something what attacks our world on a way we didn't have foreseen, even if it was possible to foresee it. And it changes really the political decision-making system. And it is also a competition between systems. The way to manage Corona is different in a democracy and in another system that is not so democratic. And now you need really citizens accepting the decisions done by politicians on the base of experts and scientifics. What you see in the concrete situation, that you cannot realize all things to bring all measures by a decree or by a political decision. You need the acceptance of the people and of the population. And this is something what has to do with freedom and solidarity. And so Corona will be the focus of a big number of problems we have in our actual society. And I am not sure that it will be so easy, but I am sure that citizen dialogues can be a very powerful instrument to bring this process to a good final end.
Any of our other speakers have an input on what our takeaways can be now for the future? Yes, Helen.
Yeah, for me, I think one of the key words for me is inclusion. I think I mentioned this in my remarks, that if we get online participation right, what we're learning using these digital tools, we have the opportunity to be more inclusive, to structure our democracies more inclusively. And I think there's so many testimonies online from people saying, you know, I was told always I could never work from home, but this is just proof that it is possible. People with disabilities, childcare needs, and so forth. It's, I think, just really shone a light on this issue, and I think it's going to motivate people, I hope, to become more inclusive, whether it's through these online participation activities or more broadly the way we structure our societies.
Thorsten?
Yeah, citizens' assemblies are also about reinstalling trust in politics, and especially in each other. If you look at the USA, where Democrats and Republicans are enemies to each other, it's maybe very important to install such processes there where those opponents can meet at one table in one room. And talk about politics and come out of the extremist opinions and find together again, because otherwise the whole society and politics will suffer, and democracy will fade away. And we also have the same problem in other countries, even if not so hard, also in Europe and Germany, around the world. And Citizens Assembly asked for me an instrument to reinstall trust in democracy. People want democracy, but not a kind of democracy we have now in many countries. People are not satisfied with that. They want to change and more participation. And Citizens Assembly can help with this also in regard to health politics and to COVID-19 and how to deal with it. The processes there are too young and new to say that they have an impact, but we will see what will happen after these assemblies that take now place on COVID-19, for example.
Thank you. Are there any other questions at this point? Any comments? I would have a comment if I'm allowed, or a question. I think it's mostly for Thorsten, because you mentioned, and I think this is interesting, that at the Bürgerrat in Germany, you discussed direct democracy. It was one of the topics that that citizens decided that they wanted to talk about at the Bürgerrat on democracy. I know that the same is true for Citizens' Assembly in Ireland. However, the Citizens' Assembly in France on climate, who now recently actually were given the opportunity to choose to put their proposals to a referendum, they decided not to do it, or to do it only on 3 questions. And so I was wondering if you could explain a little bit on the link between direct democracy and citizen participation.
Yeah, as we know, Citizens' Assembly can't decide on anything. They only can formulate proposals and give them to the politics and say, please have a look at that and make laws out of that, make politics out of that. And as we saw in Ireland, referenda and direct democracy can help to make the process even better, because the whole population is involved and can have a say on the proposals of a Citizens' Assembly. In France, they chose to put not the most topics and recommendations to referenda, because they feared that they would lose this direct democratic processes, and the population could not be as convinced as they were in the long process of a climate assembly in France. So they went the safe way, because Macron proposed to take the proposals, the recommendations sans filtre, without a filter, to the parliament, and now 146 of the 149 recommendations will be put to a referendum or to law. And that was for them the easiest way. Referenda were risky for them, even if surveys show that the population in France supports most of the recommendations. But I think one of the problems in France was that they discussed a lot about climate change and climate crisis. And it was clear that there was a possibility to put the topics on referenda, but they never informed themselves about direct democracy and discussed the pros and cons. And only in the end decided if they would like to put the topics on referenda or not. And that's one of the reasons I think they decided against many referenda.
Thank you very much. If there are no more questions, I think we might be heading then towards the close of this panel a little bit early. I would like to ask one more question, like to all of you, our panelists. Just before we go. So we've talked a lot now about citizens' assemblies, but there are of course many different kinds of citizen participation. Helen has mentioned a couple of them. I was wondering if as a perspective out of not just out of this Corona crisis, but for the future of our societies and our democracies, how we can improve our democratic systems. What would you say would be the one good advice to take, the one good tool that's out there, or a really great example that you've seen?
You mean out of the citizens' assemblies or all tools of participation?
All tools of participation.
Okay.
I would have to say the Open Government Partnership Action Plan process, of course. But it is a good process, and it's yeah. If you don't know much about it, I'd be happy to talk more and to explain how you can get involved in your countries.
I think there's no tool that can save us all, and all tools have to work together. Assemblies, participation, good election rules, direct democracy can all work together and help democracy to come forward.
Yeah.
I'm convinced that there is no miraculous formula. We need new balances between direct democracy, deliberative democracy, and representative democracy. And all these renewable initiatives must bring us more possibilities for the people to participate on the political decision-making process. But we need also a stronger part of the political decision process in the whole society, because many of our problems we have in these times, in the beginning of the 21st century, results from the fact that politics cannot decide enough important things and depends too much from other aspects, as for example, the influence of the big money in the world. And there we have very need for more participation of the people in all forms and in all circumstances.
For that, they can go to the Open Government Partnership.
Jokes aside, I completely agree with Thorsten and Karl-Heinz. All these different tools serve different purposes, and it's really a blend can create stronger democracies. Great. Then all that is left for me now is to thank all of you, our panelists today, for sharing your insights and your experiences from different countries. It was the last of our discussions on democracy and COVID-19, so I would also really like to thank all of the people who've participated throughout the course
of these sessions. And we are using these discussions. We are currently compiling and analyzing a set of recommendations from all of the talks that we've had on how we can make our democracies more resilient in times of crises. We will share this with all of you, of course, and it will be on our website. I would also finally like to invite all of you to our online forum on modern direct democracy. This will be a week-long conference in September, online, of course, where we will look at, among other things, democracy in crisis, but also how direct democracy can be used to protect the environment. We will look at Swiss direct democracy in practice and the future of direct democracy in general. And then I wish you all a cool night, which hopefully a ventilator or a couple of degrees less than whatever we have now. Thank you very much for having joined us. Yes, see you soon.
Thank you for organizing and moderating.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good night.